potential damage to Samsung is massive. It is about $2.7 billion. But that is Samsung's revenue loss alone. I think we have to be concerned about the downstream cost to the AI economy, and that can be several times larger. To give a sense of the magnitude of this, Samsung makes roughly about 33% of the world's DRAM, or the dynamic random access memory chips, and is one of only three suppliers of HBM, or high bandwidth memory. These are the chips that sits next to every NVIDIA GPU in your AI data centers. So there's no spare capacity as well to absorb this. SK Hynix, for example, and Micron, who are the only other players in the market, are already sold out through 2027. So this 18-day stoppage will not only delay Samsung's shipments, but I think it will tighten supply in the global economy even more. This will raise HBM spot prices and will have massive impact on data centers as well. Samsung's loss, in a way, will also be spread to the customers of Microsoft, Meta, Google, Dell, as the report mentioned, and Nvidia.
So can the global AI market absorb such a severe shock without project delays?
No, I highly doubt it. I think the consequences of this will spread throughout. Not just, of course, Samsung is one of the biggest players. As we said, it's one of the three biggest chip makers for HBM chips. So a delay of this sort will impact pretty much every other company that is invested in AI or which has in any way stake in AI. So the global consequences of this would be delayed shipments. It could mean higher prices of all electronic products around the globe. It could mean that this could have a lasting impact. So I think the idea of this is not just that Samsung would be hit, but the global AI companies would be hit, but also Korea's economy could be hit because Samsung Electronics alone could contribute about 12.5% of Korean GDP, and semiconductors are roughly 20% of Korea's exports. So I think the implications of this 18-day strike goes beyond what any of us could possibly imagine.
Now, the union is demanding 15% of annual operating profits be allocated to employee bonuses. How would giving into these terms impact Samsung's capital expenditure capabilities against its rivals like TSMC?
It would definitely hurt, but I think you framing this purely as a capex problem probably misses the bigger picture. So let's just put all of this in a little bit of perspective. Samsung is investing $73 billion in semiconductor capex and R&D this year, and I think that is the highest in a single year that it's ever been. And so meeting the union's demands in full would cost about 7 to 12% of its 2026 operating profit. This is according to a JP Morgan estimate. So that's a meaningful number. That's in no way insignificant. That's quite a big number. But it's not Samsung's real problem. I think Samsung is losing ground to TSMC not because of just this, but because TSMC is just simply making better chips with fewer defects, and it goes beyond just what it's paying its employees. So paying the union less will not actually fix Samsung's problem. Right? And in memory chips, for example, SK Hynix has already agreed to a 10% profit share deal last September to be paid out as bonuses for its employees. So I think this has become the norm now in this particular industry. And SK Hynix is doing this and already out investing Samsung in AI chips. So again, that shows that just increasing bonuses is not really the detrimental factor in terms of capex. Finally, Samsung is actually hemorrhaging its engineering talent to these rivals, right? So now, if you look at this thing in totality, if Samsung holds the line to protect capex and doesn't pay, and then loses 18 days of production, plus it loses its best people to its competitors, I think that's a much worse outcome than just paying the 15%.
And you mentioned the broader economic risks to South Korea's economy. How prepared is the government to intervene to help protect its semiconductor sector?
very heavily. And I think they've made no hesitations about saying it. All of the important ministers have actually come out and said so. So the Prime Minister has convened an emergency ministerial meeting. The industry minister has publicly said that emergency arbitration is unavoidable if the strike goes ahead. Now, this mechanism of emergency arbitration, it's interesting because under Article 76 of Korea's labor law, this would essentially freeze the strike for 30 days and force binding arbitration. So this is an extreme measure, and it's been invoked only 4 times since 1963. Last time that this was done was in 2005. So using it here would be extraordinary. But I think these extraordinary measures do add up to what's at stake, right? Because as I said, Samsung Electronics generates revenue equivalent to about 12.5% of Korean GDP. They totally, the Samsung group in total contributes about 15 to 20% of GDP. And so this is not looked at as a single company measure, a problem within a single company, but it's, I think, looked at as a national security issue. The government, however, will have to face one important tension. This kind of heavy handed intervention, if it does go ahead with the emergency arbitration rule, it would be seen as an extremely heavy handed intervention. And that could set a dangerous precedent that the state will rescue management and companies whenever there is, a kind of conflict between labor and so on. So I think that is the difficult choice that it has to make.